Hey everyone, welcome to Sleepy Sports. If you're loving the chill vibes and sports stories, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. This helps me make even more videos and longer ones. Drop a comment below with what you learned today. I read every single one. Thank you.
The complete story of FC Barcelona Part 1. The birth of a club. The streets of late 19th century Barcelona carried the scent of iron and sea. The harbor cranes creaked like old giants awakening at dawn, and newly built factories exhaled smoke that rose into the sky in long gray ribbons. Street vendors called out in Catalan, their voices blending with the clatter of carriage wheels and the rhythmic steps of workers marching toward the textile mills. It was a city shaking off the dust of old centuries, rebuilding itself into something modern, restless, alive. Into this world stepped a young Swiss man, slender, bright-eyed, and armed with nothing more than optimism, a fondness for sport, and a belief, naive to some, prophetic to others, that football could bind people together. His name was Hans Max Gamper, though Barcelona would soon call him Joan. He had arrived to visit relatives, expecting to stay a few weeks, and found instead a city that seemed to pulse with the same energy that lived restlessly inside him. Gamper carried in his luggage a football worn smooth by years of play in Zurich's parks. On quiet afternoons, he would walk along the open fields near the city's outskirts and juggle the ball upon his knee, letting its gentle thud echo in the dry air. It drew glances, then curiosity, then questions. Some locals had seen the British expatriates kicking balls in the industrial zones. Others had never witnessed such a sport at all. One day, near the grounds of the Velódromo de la Bonanova, a small group of boys gathered to watch him. They whispered in Catalan as he performed flicks and touches with easy grace. "What is that game?" one finally asked in a voice full of wonder. "It is called football," Gamper said. "Someday, I hope you will play it too." It was in that moment, between a man with a ball and children with bright eyes, that the first sparks of FC Barcelona flickered to life. Yet a spark is only a promise. To ignite a fire, one must gather kindling. So Gamper began to search. He met men in cafes, writers, engineers, traders from England, sailors from the north, Catalan students who hungered for culture. At night, in the smoky warm air of the Café Suizo near La Rambla, the conversations flowed easily. When Gamper spoke of football, he did so with the ardor of someone speaking of the future. Some raised eyebrows, amused. Others leaned in, intrigued. It was a cosmopolitan city, and foreign ideas fascinated them. The idea of forming a club began as a suggestion tossed across a cafe table. It grew into plans drawn on napkins, and eventually into a written announcement submitted to a local sports magazine. When the notice was printed in Los Deportes, it was brief, almost humble. A call for sportsmen interested in forming a football club to meet on the 29th of November at a gymnasium in the city center. Gamper clipped the notice carefully, folded it, and placed it in his pocket. He walked through the city that day with nervous steps. He feared that no one would come. But when he arrived at the Gimnasio Soleil, footsteps echoed behind him. Then more. By twilight, 12 men stood inside the wooden room, their breath fogging in the cool evening air. They introduced themselves: Swiss, Catalan, English, German, men of different languages and temperaments, drawn together by a love of sport and the promise of something new. A simple table stood in the center of the room. Around it, they discussed how the club should be run. They chose Walter Wild, another Swiss expatriate, as the first president, partly because he was older, partly because he seemed steady in manner. Gamper, smiling shyly, took on the role of captain. He would lead not through decree, but through action. The name came naturally: Football Club Barcelona. It was a tribute to the city that had embraced them and a declaration that the club belonged to the people who lived within it. When the men shook hands that night, something extraordinary and yet entirely unrecognized had been born. If any of them had guessed that future generations would speak their names with reverence, they gave no sign of it. The founding of the club was not marked by grand trumpets or raised flags, but by the gentle closing of a gymnasium door behind a group of idealists who believed in play. Within days, they gathered again to choose colors for their uniforms. Some argued passionately. The shades should be bold, something striking that would withstand the dust of the fields and the sun of Catalonia. Red and blue were chosen. Blaugrana, the colors that would one day come to symbolize so much more than sport. Some claimed Gamper suggested the colors based on those of his Swiss club, FC Basel. Others said they were selected because they were available. The truth blurred as the years passed. What mattered was not origin, but destiny. The first shirts were sewn by hand. The fabric was thick, the stitching uneven, but the pride was unmistakable. When the team wore them for the first time, something electric stirred in their hearts. They were no longer simply men who kicked a ball on dusty fields. They were representatives of a club, bearers of a future. Barcelona's football grounds were primitive, patches of earth that doubled as grazing fields, full of stones and uneven clumps of dirt. The players arrived carrying the goalposts themselves, setting them into the earth before matches began. There were no stands, no whistles, no lines drawn in chalk. Only the raw thrill of competition. Their first match came on a brisk December morning against a team of English expatriates. The crowd, numbering only a few dozen, watched as the men in blue and red strode onto the field with nervous pride. Gamper led them with determined steps. The English side was faster, organized, and experienced. They scored a single goal that sealed Barcelona's first defeat. Yet as the players shook hands afterward, Gamper felt no disappointment. He felt possibility. They had played, competed, endured. They had begun. More matches came. Victories, losses, and friendships soon followed. The club grew, not through money or power, but through the warmth of community. Locals brought food to the players. Young boys fetched stray balls from the bushes. Women watched from the edges of the field, cheering in voices louder than they intended. Barcelona was beginning to claim the club as its own. The early years were not easy. Money was scarce, and the club often struggled to purchase equipment or rent fields. There were moments where the dream seemed fragile, when disagreements among members threatened to fracture their unity. At one point, the club nearly disbanded altogether. But each time crisis loomed, it was passion, not wealth, that carried them through. Gamper poured his soul into the club. He recruited new players, organized training sessions, and appealed to the public for support. He believed football should not be an exclusive pastime of the elite, but an activity for all who cherished teamwork and spirit. The rising Catalan Renaissance, the cultural movement that celebrated language, literature, and regional identity, soon entwined with the club's growing presence. Barça became more than a place to play. It became a gathering point for Catalans who longed to express pride in who they were. The club's very existence felt like a celebration of difference, a fusion of foreign and local, of Catalan and European, all united beneath a single crest. The crest at first was simply the emblem of the city itself. But as the club began to form its own soul, a new design emerged. The cross of St. George, the yellow and red stripes of Catalonia, and below them the Blaugrana colors with a ball at the center. It became a symbol not merely of a team, but of belonging. In the cafes of the Example district, supporters debated lineups as eagerly as they discussed politics. Workers left their factories early on match days, cycling to the fields to catch glimpses of the team they were proud to call their own. Children stitched makeshift balls from rags and played until their legs ached. The club's first true rivals emerged from within. Catalonia matches against Espanyol carried ferocity and pride. Some games ended in arguments, others in celebrations, but all were marked by intensity. Football had begun to weave itself into the cultural identity of Barcelona's people. Gamper watched it all with quiet joy. He saw in every cheering supporter and eager child the growth of the dream he had once scribbled into a magazine notice. The club was no longer his alone. It had become theirs. Barcelona needed a home worthy of its growth. After years of makeshift grounds, the club secured the use of a proper field, the Camp de la Calle Industria, known simply as La Escopidora, for the way fans perched along the narrow stands appeared to hang over the pitch. It was small, but it vibrated with energy. The echoes of drums and voices bounced off the wooden beams as matches unfolded with thrilling aggression. Players in Barcelona's colors fought not just for goals, but for the growing pride of a city. Each triumph brought celebrations in taverns and plazas, where the red and blue flags fluttered like new icons. Each defeat brought vows of improvement. In those years, Barcelona earned its first trophies, building victories brick by brick. The team grew stronger, more cohesive, more daring. Their style evolved into something fluid, intuitive, a precursor to the beauty that would one day astonish the world. Yet ambition invites conflict. Debates about leadership, finances, and direction simmered within the club. Presidents came and went. Opinions clashed. Membership fluctuated wildly. And in 1908, the fragile structure trembled under the weight of uncertainty. Some argued the club had little future. Others saw it as a burden. Once again, the dream stood on the edge of dissolution. Gamper, older now yet filled with the same fervor as the day he had arranged the founding meeting, stepped forward. He accepted the presidency at a moment when many would have stepped away. "The club will continue," he told the members. "We will not surrender, we will grow." And under his leadership, they did. He brought financial stability by encouraging membership drives, organized fundraisers, and fostered relationships with local businesses. He supported youth programs and sought out talented players who could elevate the team's level. He invested in the greater community, believing that the club must always remain tied to the people who loved it. Barcelona's identity deepened. It became a social hub, a cultural emblem, a shared language of pride. Gamper's vision transcended goals and victories. He imagined a club that could defend values, spirit, unity, resilience. Slowly, the small gathering of 12 men had grown into an institution. As the 1910s progressed, Barcelona faced strong adversaries in Catalan competitions. They battled fiercely for trophies that today seem humble but were, at the time, gateways to recognition and prestige. Victories brought joy, losses brought determination. And through it all, the supporters kept coming. They arrived rain or shine. They waved flags, sang songs, and carried the club through triumphs and turmoil alike. They filled the stands until the wooden benches creaked beneath them, leaning forward with each pass, cheering with each shot, groaning with each miss. The bond between club and people, between team and city, grew unbreakable. Football had become more than entertainment. It had become a symbol of unity in a region that often felt unheard, unrecognized, or overshadowed. Barcelona, the club, was becoming Barcelona, the idea. The world changed rapidly. The Great War swept across Europe. Altering lives and memories, Spain remained neutral, yet the echoes of conflict reached its shores. Amidst it all, FC Barcelona persisted. The club continued to grow, to compete, to gather its community close like a family. Gamper eventually stepped away from the presidency, but his influence remained woven into every fiber of the club. His legacy was not a list of victories, but a culture, an unwavering belief that football could be a sanctuary, a beacon, a voice. By the time the first 2 decades of the 20th century passed, Barcelona had transformed from a fragile idea into a powerful symbol of pride. It stood at the threshold of a new era, one that would bring both glory and adversity, triumph and heartbreak. Yet the foundations were strong, built by hands that believed in more than sport, guided by a man who came to Barcelona a visitor and became the architect of its heart. The story of FC Barcelona was only beginning, but already the city was whispering its name with love. Already, children wore red and blue ribbons in their hair, and shopkeepers placed small banners outside their stores on match days. Already, the chants of supporters rose like prayers from the stands, echoing across rooftops and alleyways. From the dusty fields to the budding pride of a people, the club had found its soul, and the city had found its mirror.